Hi, shall I get cracking? Right, hello everyone, and good morning and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Matt Kirby. I'm the committee member who's responsible for the MRS ICG Award for Independent Consultants. And today I'm delighted to welcome 4 finalists from 2024, who will tell us a little bit more about their kind of excellent entries coming up. First, a word from our sponsor, which is Norstat. Norstat is a European data collection company with large proprietary active online panels in the UK, Ireland, and 17 other countries. As they own the panels, they can provide the audiences their customers want to speak to, as well as provide reassurance about the source of data. Note that Norstat recently ran a lunch and learn from us, and the recording of that's available on the ICG website. So you'll be able to hear kind of directly from them on that recording. But back to today. Here are our finalists, and this is the order they'll be presenting in. And they're all each going to share a brief summary of their submissions, and to ensure they have time to speak, we'll keep questions to the end. Everyone will have kind of about eight minutes or so to chat, leaving time for questions. So if you want to ask a question, either pop it in the chat and we'll pick it up at the end, or you can simply turn your webcam on the end and ask it kind of directly. At the end, just raise your hand if you want to do that. For anyone who doesn't know, the MRS ICG Award for Independent Consultants started in 2016, so it's been running for 9 years, 2024 to 9th year. There are 4 judges, 2 of whom are nominated by the MRS and 2 by the ICG. I'm all experienced researchers, so a big thank you to my fellow judges this year, who were Lucy Hobbs, Billy Desai, and Susie Mullen. And the standard of entries was very high again in 2024, so being shortlisted was a fantastic achievement, as we're about to hear from the finalists, who will demonstrate the great work that's being done by independents. And that's the whole point of the award, is to celebrate the great work that independents are doing in our sector. If you are inspired to enter this year and become the 10th winner of the award, then you should start thinking now. The submission window opens on the 1st of May, and it runs to 26th of June. So that's the whole of May and most of June to enter. And obviously there's plenty of time to start kind of planning before then. There'll be more details announced soon. We are planning on running an event in early April where people can ask questions, and I'll kind of tell you a bit more about how to kind of prepare a winning entry. But if you have any questions in the meantime, I'm always happy to kind of chat. But anyway, that's enough of me. Let's hear from the first of our excellent 2024 finalists, and so which will be Kate Turner representing Citrine. So Kate, over to you.
Thank you very much. Right, so I'm going to try and share my screen now. Can everybody see my screen and hear me? I'm going to assume you can. If you can't, then please shout. So thanks Matt, and thanks to everybody for attending this morning. We're going to spend the next few minutes just talking through our submission for this award. But first, just if I can get this working. Apologies, I'm not quite sure what's happening here. It was working absolutely fine. There we go. So first, I just want to introduce ourselves. So we are Citrine Research. There are 2 of us. It's myself, Kate Turner, and my business partner colleague, Julie Irwin, who is also on this webinar. And we are Citrine Research. We've been going since the very early part of 2021. I think deep in lockdown was when we launched Citrine Research. Obviously, we've both been in research for a lot longer than that, but Citrine is about coming up for 4 years old, and we are financial services specialists. So we work for financial services clients, and we work for all different types of clients across all different types of products and services, across all different types of audiences, and all different types of research, but all very much focused on the financial services sector. And this particular awards paper, the project that we submitted for this awards paper was very much against a consumer duty backdrop. So I'm sure, as many of you are aware, the FCA launched their consumer duty rules back in July 2023, so almost 18 months ago. And those rules require firms, our clients, to ensure good outcomes for customers. And for our clients, and the particular client we were working on for this program of research was Legal & General, what that means is that they have an obligation to ensure they're acting in the best interests of their customers and provide evidence that their products and services are understood and represent value for money for the customers. And that's really where we come in as researchers, to get close to customers, to do the research and to provide that evidence, or give the feedback as to what needs to be done to provide the evidence to the FCA. And we have very much lived and breathed consumer duty for the past few years. And this particular programme was against that consumer duty backdrop. But what we needed to do, and what was really quite challenging, was we needed to get close to customers at a particularly vulnerable time of their lives. These were vulnerable customers. All of them were emotionally vulnerable, physically vulnerable, and were either going through or had recently been through a particularly challenging time of their lives. So for this program of research, we needed to really think carefully about how to design an approach where we are encouraging vulnerable customers at a vulnerable time of their lives to participate, that they could see the value in participating in the research. And then we needed to collect the data in a way where we're getting these vulnerable people to feel safe, to open up and engage in a way that they feel comfortable sharing their experiences. And obviously, at the same time, we also had to make sure that the stakeholders within Legal & General were engaged, and they were very much coming on that journey with us, and they were, hearing those and listening to those customer experiences. And the other challenge, really, which I'm sure is familiar to many, is that we had to deliver that on quite a limited budget. And what we've been asked to do as part of this presentation, and we don't have very long, we've only got about 8 minutes, is to kind of talk about why, the benefits that being an independent consultancy brought to the client and brought to the program. And for us, we are there's two of us. We are sector specialists, and we are highly experienced. We've both been in research for several decades, I think between us about 60 years. So we've been out there, we've been talking to customers, and we've been working in financial services for all that time. But as an independent consultancy, we were very much able to fully immerse ourselves in the research. And this is very much in contrast to when we've worked in large agencies in the past, where we've not been able to sort of get our hands dirty, if you like, and be fully immersed. But as an independent consultancy, we have been able to, and that's really brought significant benefits to the client. So first of all, it kind of brings that flexibility, it brings that agility to adapt. So as we were going through the fieldwork, as we were conducting the interviews, we were feeding back to the stakeholders, and we were feeding back to the task force which had been formed, and they were able to ask questions. We were able to adapt the guide. We were able to kind of test certain ideas that they had or concepts. So we were very much able to kind of have that iterative approach. We were also conducting a lot of other consumer duty projects or projects that were under the consumer duty umbrella at the same time, which enabled that cross-fertilization, because we were out there having other conversations with customers, other conversations with stakeholders, which brought that benefit of really that cross-fertilization of ideas. What we did wasn't particularly groundbreaking in terms of the research approach. We were conducting depth interviews over Zoom, but because we've got that experience, we're used to kind of making customers feel psychologically safe. we were able to use different techniques and adapt our approach according to what these specific needs and circumstances were. That really brings that qualitative excellence. And we were able to put the respondents at ease to help them feel psychologically safe so that they could open up and share those experiences. I mean, as I've said, we do have decades of sector experience between us. So we also know we can talk the stakeholders' languages. So not only were we out there talking to the customers, but we were also engaging with the stakeholders in a way that they listened, really. And that, I think, ultimately, and these are the words of the client, not necessarily the words of me, but that ultimately kind of delivered insights that went viral. And again, I'm borrowing the client's words there. It the impact and the speed at which the results were acted upon and the insight was shared was really unprecedented. I mean, financial services is quite renowned for moving at quite a slow speed. It's an industry where there is a lot of regulation, where there are a lot of legacy systems. It doesn't move very quickly. But this particular project did move quickly. The insight was shared pretty much immediately. It was acted upon, and changes were made within a really short space of time. So something that typically would take many months was actually being acted upon in days and weeks. And that has ultimately already led to better outcomes for customers, and will continue to do so. And those outcomes are being measured. And I think that's really what the power of this research was. And I think the feedback that we've had was that's why we became a finalist. It wasn't the methodology, it was really the impact that the research had within the business, and ultimately the impact that it had on customers that really made it stand out. So it was about the significant change within an unprecedented time frame. And I think that really is it. That was a snapshot of of our paper. But I just want to finish by saying thank you to the ICG and the MRS for having this award, for having something that sort of celebrates the contribution of small independent consultancies, because quite often at these award ceremonies they are dominated by big agencies, by big budget projects. But actually sometimes the smaller and the lower budget projects can be the most effective and can actually lead to significant change for customers. So I think it's great that there is an award out there that celebrates us.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kate. And bang on time. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Dan now, who'll take you through his project.
Great. Okay, I'm going to attempt to try and share now. Okay, see if I can get this going. Can you guys see that? I've just got some stills. Is that coming through? Matt, is that all right? Yep, great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. So yeah, as Kate just said, we've got to whiz through this because there's quite a few of us. So a little bit about myself. My name's Dan. I work under two businesses, The Word Is Out and Explainers. My main background and my main sort of USP as a researcher, I guess, is bringing insight to life with video. So helping clients land insights and research in a business and activate insights and research, basically. This project was with my business, The Word Is Out, as an independent, and it was with Futures Housing Group. They are a non-profit housing association, and they provide affordable homes for people across the UK, but predominantly in the East Midlands. And they basically were they put a tender out for a customer closeness project. It was more of a sort of bring to life your segments sort of thing. And I proposed that we do films for each segment, and we do a sort of two-stage approach with some self-filmed videos and then sort of like a deep ethnography kind of thing. But proposition was very much like this is a video only delivery, so there was no report. It was purely just we're going to make a lot of films to help bring these insights to life within the business. And spoiler alert, I won it, which was really cool. And it was a really great project. And originally it was just going to be like 4 months. We were going to have it wrapped up in that sort of time, but it massively changed when we started going and speaking to people. Um, like Kate, we had a lot of vulnerable customers, people who were really actually anxious or angry with Future's housing group, and we didn't really know that until we started speaking to people. Um, we had a really good relationship with the client quite early on, and I felt like it was worth telling them and potentially suggesting that we do something slightly different and we pivot the project a little bit because the idea was to get close to customers. Ultimately, sorry, I just gone to the next slide. Ultimately, the project turned into a 20-month deep dive that I was gradually just like picking up and putting down across quite a long period. Just an insight discovery piece that prioritized customer needs. Um, and we delivered lots of videos in the end. But originally in the end we moved from a segment sort of focused delivery to more of a theme focused delivery. And a big part of that was, I've just gone to the next slide. A big part of that was a workshop that I ran with the client. So I got all of the depths and all of the video and all of this great insight, and we sat down for like a whole day and just watched lots and lots of video. Um, and I produced transcripts of everything that we were going to show. And I give every single person in the room a copy of every transcript for every video, and we all watched it together and we went through and we highlighted key points. This I thought was really a little bit more what you would kind of do from a film background, right? So I was trying to hybrid a research approach and a film approach so that we could watch all of this stuff and then have a discussion afterwards rather than people pausing and doing all of that sort of stuff. And it really allowed the client to be very hands-on with the deliverables, which I think sometimes isn't necessarily the case with video. I think it's very much like, yeah, we'll go and make that, we'll go and film everything, and then we'll give you a nice little package at the end. And that was why I really wanted to um, put my project forward because I thought it was a little bit different in that sense, even though there wasn't a report in the sense that the client might usually, you might send the report and then they might have some notes and things. I really wanted to take that idea and use that with video so that the client could really steer it for what was best for the business. And ultimately, we came away from this workshop with the idea of the themed approach that I said. So we made 9 themed films. And Paul, who was the lead on this at the time, he was sort of like head of comms with the research department as well, specifically went to different stakeholders and said, would you benefit from a film about community or health or something like this? So all of the insight was made and constructed with a view to knowing how the audience would consume it. Yeah. And ultimately that led to like a massive impact on FHG. They redesigned their neighborhoods team because a big thing that came through was um, on the ground community support needed to be much better, and they changed a lot of structural things to help them get close to customers and deliver real change. Um, I guess, I know that I don't have much time, so I'm just going to wrap up really quickly. I think that in terms of like applying for, this award, if you can carve out a bit of time, I think it's really worth it. I personally was in such a bubble with this project and it had gone on for so long. I was just like, it's just one of those projects. Everyone's got those projects that are, like you know, everyone's doing stuff like this. And then you speak to people about what you're doing, or you start writing it down, and you're like, oh, this is actually really good. And there's some really good work here. And the clients put a lot of work in. I've put a lot of work in. This deserves to be shown and to be like, you know, championed really. And I think if you're feeling that way, I think it's a great exercise, you know, even if you don't get all the way through to bringing home a trophy. I think it's a really nice um, thing to do because it allows you to some reflection time. But also in the spirit of the ICG, it is that hive mind, that community thing where you can speak to people about it. And I did get a bit of support from other ICG members and sort of said, you know, how would you say this? Or like, you know, can I just word vomit for you for a minute and then see how you would sort of pull this together in terms of a paragraph. But yeah, I think it's just about recognizing that, you know, we do good work and that should be celebrated. And it's in the same spirit as all of the coffee mornings and things like that. It's just about trying to burst that bubble and recognize that we are hundreds of independent people who do some really cool stuff. And even though you can't necessarily point to like the ROI of, oh, well, you know, I think it's worth doing it because of X, Y, Z. I ultimately have done this twice and came away from it with a really good feeling about doing some really good work. So that's why I would say.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dan. That's really good to hear that you find it such a positive experience
100%, yeah.
putting it all together. Um, and so over to Jude and Hannah next.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay. Hopefully you can see our slides. Okay, well, hi everyone. I'm Jude, and I'm joined with Hannah as well. We're from
Hello.
Red Insights. We're a relatively new business and new to the ICG as well, so this is all very exciting for us. So our business actually launched at the beginning officially last year. And Hannah and I actually met doing a job share in John Lewis partnership, contracting together. And then we worked together for a year client side and then decided to continue working together agency side. But most of our background in our career is agency side previous to working at John Lewis together. So this was our first big stab at an award submission. So we were absolutely thrilled and very overexcited to be shortlisted. And actually our submission in a nutshell, we did spend some time at the beginning of the submission talking about Ren Insight, about who we are and what we believe in and what we stand for. We'd actually just built our website and done loads of work on that. So it was a really nice chance to kind of extend our thinking. And we paused a bit in our submission and talked about how we put everything through a customer closeness lens. And actually, we tended to call that closeness-led insight, so that everything we're trying to do is to build greater impact and influence in a business. And actually, everyone on this call is obviously very experienced, seasoned researchers. But a big part of making insight matter, as we all know, is just the influence it then has in an organization. And that can be the real tricky bit. And we know from our time at John Lewis Partnership as well, it depends on how bureaucratic an organization is and how complex the structure is and how far down or up insight is in the food chain. And what we found in our time, client side, but also at Red Insight, is that actually a closeness-led insight approach, looking through things through a kind of customer closeness lens, has the power and the ability to kind of amplify the voice of the insight more than traditional research, which goes back again to the point from Citron Research from the beginning, that actually sometimes it's those smaller projects and those smaller budgets, if treated in the right way, can have really great amplification and influence in a business. So our mission is really all about making insight louder, which is why we're called Red Insights, not because we love birds particularly, although we do love birds. It's because wrens have a really powerful, and that's what we try and do with a lot of the insight that we put out. We are just a two woman business, so there's just Hannah and I. So we don't do 60 project groups, we don't do shed loads of field work, but with the work that we do, we try and make it as loud as possible. And actually, just after we joined the ICG, there was this lovely, lively debate about the role of AI in qualitative research. And so our submission did focus on that a little bit, about actually how, is it a bit dangerous to launch a sort of customer closeness agency in the face of AI? But actually now feels like the right time more than ever, because it's not just the analytical processes that we need to protect. which I think as qualitative researchers, we always try and protect the way our thinking is working. Actually, it's simply protecting that time in a room with customers, with stakeholders. We'll probably always do it, but they're the ones that will stop doing it in the face of AI. And that's what's really important, building that customer EQ and that muscle memory. So it was a bit about that in our submission about what on earth is closeness-led insight. And then we went on to look at 3 different examples of our work in the past year of how closeness-led insight has played out and how it actually has quite a different impact commercially and culturally, and can be in some ways more tangible, the impact than traditional research. So we didn't just look at one project like all the other submissions. And after we submitted it and looked at the other submissions, we thought, oh, have we missed a trick here? We looked at it across the body of our work to say it's not just a methodology or a project, it's more of a philosophy that we approach. So Hannah will jump in here to talk about one of our examples with Waitrose.
Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 different case studies just very briefly, I know. So first one is for the John Lewis Partnership. So we did a project in 2023 at Christmas time for Waitrose to look at how can they create more emotional connection in the shopping experience in Waitrose at Christmas. So a lovely project to be part of. And we used our closeness-led approach here. So we did store intercepts, we did virtual customer closeness sessions supported by customer shopping films. And this really allowed stakeholders from around the business to spend time with and interact with their customers. And adding to this, we also ran an interactive closeness debrief. So this is something we do a little bit more now. We gathered star participants from the research sessions to bring to life our insight story in the debrief. So rather than just hearing us present the findings, they kind of heard it from the horse's mouth, which was much more impactful. This also included a Q&A that we did that the stakeholders could be part of, because they always love to ask further questions. And it really meant that the customers were bringing so much colour and context to that strategic story that we were telling the clients. It made for a much more memorable debrief. And I know that the impact of our work is something that we wanted to talk about as part of this award and something that we really focus on at Wren. And this project led to a number of tangible outcomes. So firstly, it inspired a tasting trial of hot food tastings in Waitrose, which came to life this year. It fed directly into a multi-million-pound update of Waitrose service standards, so informing the role of partners as food experts and food support in store. Again, something that we're looking at a bit more in further projects this year. And it also led to 60 branches around the country implementing dedicated Christmas shopping evenings. So using our insight to really shape and plan strategy. And our stakeholders fed back after the project that, you know, it was the store experience at Christmas is a real business hot topic, obviously, for a brand like Waitrose. But it's really hard for them to demonstrate return on specific store activations. So this work really highlighted that bigger halo impact on brand perceptions that different in-store activity can have, and actually led to them doubling the investment in the store experience. And our work just made that look more commercially justifiable. So we felt that was a good example of when evidence in sales and data is a bit hard to come by, so around the return of a specific store activation. And actually closeness-led insight can help to provide the emotional evidence that stakeholders need to reassure the business that they should invest in this way.
I'm driving, I just remembered. Okay, right. The next one we touched on was Penguin Random House, which was very different. So our partnership with Penguin Random House, we're in our sort of 3rd year of running their Consumer Connects program. And they're a very complex business and quite a different type of business to John Lewis Partnership in that they have 9 business divisions, they have 12 segments, 12 reader audience segments. And the insight team is quite a decentralized business, and the insight team supports divisional marketing and publishing teams. So actually, it's really hard to bring the business together through insight with a sort of organizational structure like that. So our program is really designed to kind of get the 9 business divisions working together more. So in our submission, and I don't have time to go through it now, we kind of drew out what we do methodologically wise in the program to bring the teams together. But we touched on the impact again. So there are some really nice tangible examples of how the program has actually had some commercial impact, and that it's really helped some of the crime fiction marketing teams understand how to use quotes and verbatims on the front cover, for example. So it's quite specific direction. But the thing that we were most proud of and that we focused on the most in the submission is the cultural impact the programme has had, and that it's actually given the insight team for the first time the almost permission and the opportunity to work across the business divisions in a very strategic way. So it's actually fed into strategic pricing projects involving a number of different business divisions. And it's a nice example of actually insight helping to have greater influences in harder to reach parts of the business. So yeah, that's just one example we wanted to focus on, but we do a continuous program of activations and experiences with the Penguin business across the year, some face-to-face, some virtual, always spending time with customers, always doing a bit of panel discussion, always having film-led output. But actually it was the kind of cultural impact that we really walked away from at the end of last year, in terms of the insight team saying, I'm actually getting a seat at this table that I didn't really have before, and it's because more people are now coming to these sessions and hearing from their readers firsthand.
I'm aware we've got about 1 minute left, so I'm going to race through just a final example of a project that we included in our submission. So John Lewis partnership again, but this time the JL brand. So they came to us to help them kind of bring authentic customer voices into their senior decision making for the John Lewis Partnership Board. So they wanted to understand a little bit more around how they could get those voices heard amongst their senior team. So we ran customer closeness sessions with Sharon White, who was the chair of JLP at the time, and the whole of the JLP board. And the project was really a reminder of why building customer EQ at all levels in businesses really matters. So our session design allowed the board to hear insights in kind of new and memorable ways, and therefore helping them to stay true to their mission that they have of being kind of customer obsessed. So our closeness session kind of helped them to do that. And this meant creating quality time with board members and kind of very carefully cast customers. So they walked the store with the customers, they spent time in a facilitated group setting, in one-to-one settings. And this allowed the board to hear from customers, have an experience with them in a kind of live and memorable way. And that's all kind of helping to unlock these deeper levels of empathy for their customers and understanding of their target audiences. So it really helped to unite the board, and it led to this renewed hunger and appreciation for customer closeness in future planning, which was important because actually that was challenging some views of some of the team that thought it wasn't really needed. So fortunately that worked. And we just felt that was a good example of how the power is really in the experience of closeness-led insight, something that can't be replicated with a PowerPoint report or Zoom meeting or an AI replacement, as we mentioned. So board members are really walked away feeling differently, not just about their customers, but also the value of the experience. And again, as Jude sort of said with the Penguin example, helping to put insight on a more sort of senior map in the business.
And just lastly, we did enter this submission alongside our clients. So they really heavily fed into all of the evidence points we were using. We got lots of quotes from stakeholders throughout the submission. And our clients also joined us on the night on the MRS Awards at John Lewis and Penguin. So it's a really lovely chance to actually just build our relationship with them as well through the submission process. So thank you, ICG, for that opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that taking us through that. That was great. So Rob, over to you, our winner.
Hi, everyone. Let's see if I can get this up. Okay, off we go. Hi, everyone. A really interesting submission. It's really nice to hear from everyone else because we didn't know about everyone else's projects in the evening. And I think probably what I'm going to tell you about is a combination of lots of things that have already been spoken about. So Future State is me. Used to be two of us, but sadly my business partner is no longer with us. But we've been working in public sector and social policy for a while, and this was one of our clients. We've been on the rosters of Ofcom, the FCA, GSMA, lots of acronyms out there. So we've done a lot of social advocacy and policy work. And this client is the Communications Consumer Panel. They're an adjunct to Ofcom. And what they do is they represent citizens, consumers, and micro businesses around the UK, and particularly looking at vulnerable people who might be suffering harm potentially at the hands of public policy or perhaps industry practices. A classic example could be sort of broadband pricing, where they say up to. and everyone thinks that they're going to get a pricing related to the actual speed, but of course it isn't. So they try to be at the front line, if you like, of representing people who might be vulnerable. They cover all the nations, so the 4 nations and the regions, and urban and rural, that's their spread. And they're trying to be in a sort of early warning sign to Ofcom, governments, industry, civil society, and they look after the services of fixed line, broadband, mobile, post, and landline. So that's the sort of context of what we were doing. The project was around experiences of communications services across the UK. So it was a very broad thing, and they decided they wanted to look at remote communities because there's been over the years, of course, big issues around the digital divide between urban environments and rural environments. We've all been to the country and haven't got a connection, and those people who are living there, of course, have to suffer this. And the impact of COVID on working and family life brought this to life, of course, and really made it quite difficult for people who are living with very low connectivity. You know, changes in work and also remote working, but also education, kids doing homework and all these sorts of things. There's also the government's digital by default kind of principles, so putting public services online. If you don't have a connection, of course, people have to have huge workarounds, and it has a huge impact on their life. And of course, the whole talk about how much government is spending in terms of infrastructure and all the millions being poured into reducing this digital divide, but whether this was actually real. So when we looked at the project and when we won it, we realized that this was going to be quite an emotive subject when we go out to talk to these communities who perhaps have, you know, real difficulties with connectivity. And then when we looked at the potential journey, so this was very much a qualitative project. This was face-to-face stuff. It was a road trip, effectively, and we were delighted to be involved in this because it's quite rare, you know, everything's moved online. It was going back to the old days, really. So we went on this journey from Exmoor to Northumberland, right up to the northernmost inhabited part of the British Isles in a place called Unst in Shetland, which they insisted on. Then to Oban, and then to Powys, and then to County Fermanagh. And the reason I bring this up is really because we felt when we looked at this is going to be potentially a very visual project. You know, these extraordinary places we're going to that we probably never go to again. And also it's going to be quite an emotive thing in terms of talking to people who may be struggling. So we decided to flip the approach that we might take. So normally in the public sector world, you would end up doing quite large pieces of work that might take several months, and you would write a report, and this report would be published. And then you might also add in some video just to bring things to life, essentially. But the main bulk of it would be the report. So we took the decision, this was after we'd won the project, to flip it and decide to make a film. And we didn't tell the client, actually. We know the client very well. We've been working with them for years, but we decided not to tell them and just to take it under our own sort of steam and say, right, this feels like a film. Well, we've never really done a sort of social documentary before, but we felt that it was the right ingredients for this. So we flipped it on its head, and we made a 22-minute in this case, was a sort of social documentary. We called it The Struggle for Fairness because it was all about the inequality of provision of broadband connectivity and mobile connectivity, not just between urban and rural, but also within villages themselves. Somebody would have a very good connection, and then 50 yards down the road, somebody would have no connection. So there was a real sense of inequality. We made a whole bunch of teasers as well to support the film, and then we had a little addendum, which was just kind of adding some detail around the project in terms of sample and those sorts of things. So the main bulk of it was this film. And fortunately, it was very well received. So we had a very nice reception. We literally just told them to put the video on and we played it to them. And then they were really delighted with the work because it was very impactful, really. You know, we were able to show people. And as Dan knows, you know, the video can be a very powerful way of expressing this. So on the back of that, we were then given 2 more projects. We were given a project for inner cities, which is looking at people who live in fairly low income, quite vulnerable people living in high rise. What was their experience of communication services? And then also micro businesses around the country. So there were some challenges in this, as you can imagine, when you're doing these projects. I think from a rural and remote perspective, we didn't have the access through recruiters as you would normally have. So we had to find a way to get to these communities, not only select the right communities, which could have a balance of in terms of demographic population from life stages and those sorts of things, but we needed to actually go and find the people within there to talk to. So it was a sort of very flexible, iterative way of doing it. We tended to choose a community because we had somebody that was a connection through me or through the recruiters that we use, lovely Sarah at Field Mouse. And then we would then expand that either remotely before we went there or on the ground. So when we went to Shetland, we only knew the brewer. He was a gin brewer right in the north of Shetland, and through him we sort of networked a bit, and then we went up there for 4 days and spent quite a lot of time in the pub, not surprisingly, and that was a bit of a focal point. And then we just networked, and we've managed to find it, and it was a very effective way of doing things in some ways because it allowed us to sort of fill our quotas by choosing the people, by talking to people, and it just meant it was very flexible. And I suppose that was one of the things, by being an independent, you can do this. It was just me and my very old friend who's a filmmaker, and we were wandering around the country talking to people and trying to build up this representative sample, if you like. So that was one of the challenges in terms of being rural and remote. The inner cities were very, very different, of course, because we were talking to or trying to target sort of vulnerable people, so potentially low income people living in high rise. And this is a very different challenge. Generally, people who of those, particularly around sort of financial vulnerability, don't tend to like researchers coming into their home, let alone two sort of white middle-aged blokes with a whole load of camera equipment. And the films that we were making were broadcast quality, so we had sound and vision, we had kit. And so we had to really prepare for this. And so we spent a bit of time having selected the respondents and recruited them. We then spent some time talking to them. We showed them some of the stuff we've done. We spoke to them on the phone. So by the time we came to talking to them, they knew us. And I suppose by being very old friends together, we were able to develop a bit of a rapport. As we all know, it's very important, as Citrine said, Kate said, it's important to be able to develop that trust, because you can't get people to talk to camera very easily. And in order to get some really rich, candid responses, we needed to have quite a relationship with them. So the setup for inner cities was very difficult, but it was worth it because we got some very good stuff on film. And then lastly was micro businesses. It was difficult in terms of the hundreds of thousands of micro businesses around the UK. How do we get a representation of everything from micro businesses being generally between one and the definitions between 1 and 10 employees. Anything from very online gaming communities to a laundrette. It's everything in between. So there's lots of difference. The difficulty about that was trying to find that representation and finding the right voices so that we could give a balanced view. So I think underpinning all of this was the sort of relationship that we had to build up between me and my cameraman friend and the participants. And in order to get people to be, capture stuff on film that's meaningful, it's hard and it takes time and it takes rapport. And, that's part of the old skills we all have as qualitative researchers. So it was a real pleasure to be able to do this. It was really like going back in time. And then when it came to editing, that was the beast. I mean, there were times when I regretted not just saying, should we have just written a report? Because we had effectively 20 minutes, we set 20 minutes as the film length. We had to represent the nations, the regions, life stages, vulnerability, the services had to be represented. We had to get a balanced views. And of course, everything's unscripted. We had about 20 hours per film of video. We had huge amounts of unstructured qualitative data, and we had to try and make sense of this and tell a balanced story. We didn't want to come back with polemics. So we had to do a lot of work then. I think some of the tools that are now available would have cut the time in terms of the analysis considerably, but it wasn't, I suppose, from an independent perspective and from a micro business perspective, it was a bit of a labor of love. I don't think in most agencies we would have done this in the way that we did because it was hugely time consuming. It wasn't the most cost effective way of doing things, but it was something that we felt needed to be done properly, because I don't think probably projects will be commissioned like these anymore. Maybe 10 years down the line, just from a historical perspective. But I just don't think the money's going to be there for doing these really deep sort of ethnographic projects. So in the end, the reason why I think we got and I've never put in for a prize before actually. It was because it changed the way the client thought about how they could engage with their stakeholders. And you can read this, and that's kind of why we felt that it was worth putting a submission in.
Right. Thanks, Rob. Are you going to leave it there? That was really fascinating. That's really great insight into the work you've done. And thank you to everyone. That's a really, like I said, it's four really fascinating projects. And I'm just looking. We don't have any questions in the chat. Do you want to stop sharing, Rob?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. Sorry, hold on.
That's okay.
There we go.
So yeah, if anyone wants to ask a question, I just had a kind of question, because I think there were a few kind of themes. I was just kind of going back to my notes from the kind of judging process, and just kind of hearing it today, because it felt like there were lots of issues with, I think everyone was using quite established methodology, kind of really core kind of research skills, but in all of the submissions there was something new and something different. And the note I used was kind of purposeful innovation. So everyone did something that was a bit different, that was, or sometimes very different, for a particular reason to solve a problem. The other issue, I think, was there was quite a lot of thing about flexibility, and I think it's partly, particularly as independents, being able to kind of evolve the project as it goes along to make it better and more impactful and kind of deeper, and to kind of have a kind of bigger reach. And the other thing I felt, which is you all shared, was a sense of your own commitment to the project and to your clients and to your clients' clients, the customers, the consumers, the people who would ultimately be impacted. But it was a sense of it having a bigger difference than perhaps conventional. It wasn't just one small team making a decision and a change, but it was something that kind of went beyond a marketing team or a research team into the organization. And I was just wondering, to what extent this is to kind of all of you, to what extent when you set out on these kind of projects, you kind of felt, were you aware of that? Did you feel this is something that could have a really deep impact, or was it something that only became apparent over time? As in, was it obviously that these projects from the start would have that kind of impact? Any thoughts?
I suppose I'll jump in. I wasn't really sure. I felt that it was one of those projects that could just end up being rather sort of kind of bland, and so that's why we took the decision to do what we did, because we felt that it wasn't going to represent the people as we hoped. But yes, it's certainly, I think, in terms of your progression, I think notice this from all of the submissions, it feels like there is a progression, Matt, in terms of being able to adapt as you go along, and to try and, as you say, really get something more impactful as you go through the project.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Kate and I, it became apparent once we actually started doing the interviews, because the emotion that came through from the respondents. I mean, it was actually quite tough doing the interviews. We felt emotionally affected by a number of them, so we knew the power of what we had in the video, and so we felt that it was going to be impactful for legal in general, and far more impactful from some bullet points or verbatim on a word, in a PowerPoint document. That the video output was really going to get them close to the customer and that emotional state that they were in at the time of interacting with legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same, to be honest. I mean, I mentioned it briefly earlier. I think once I'd started actually speaking to the customers that I had gone from a very long list of, some of those interviews were very emotional, and I just felt like, the original proposition and the deliverable was, as I said, it was a segment driven deliverable, and I just felt like, that I was speaking to people who were you know, genuinely in tears in a depth, and I just felt like, how am I supposed to put this in a box of this is everyone from this segment? It was just, it would have been unfair to the people, but also to the client and the money that they had trusted that to spend on this project. And so I think being an independent was so it, it it was so important, because I feel like projects that with a big agency doing that would have just gone down to numbers, and as Rob said, I think would have just ended up going, well, we need to wrap this up. Let's get it sorted. Like, and so I think it is a little bit of a labor of love when you recognize that, and you have to make a decision of how much am I going to sink into this, you know, that in terms of like getting the best output for everyone in general, for yourself, for the client, for the people that you're speaking to. So yeah.
Yeah. Anna, do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think for us, a big part of why we felt it had impact was the feedback that we had from our stakeholders, because we've set up our business structured around how can we have more impact in businesses and make insights go further. So I think when we'd run our customer closing sessions for the John Lewis partnership, for example, across both of those case studies we talked about, we had great feedback from them, and they said, this really has reshaped how the business is feeling about insight. It has helped some of those customer truths to land in a different way to how they have before. So yeah, I think for us it was that feedback that kind of told us, actually we have done something a little bit different and a little bit special for them. So yeah, I guess that inspired us to to apply.
Great. There's a question here from Linda, who said, it's directed at Citrine, so Kate and Julie,
Yeah.
saying that asking about how you presented your findings to L&G so that they were so quickly kind of appreciated and kind of acted on, especially given that kind of both Dan and Rob's presentations, they were so impactful because they were videos, so you could see the people. So how did you kind of get that impact?
It was a video reel was essentially the key impact. I mean, there was a presentation we did talk them through, but it was a video reel, and it was that clips bringing to life the customer experience, which kind of helped the stakeholders feel close to customers and understand their experiences. So a video reel was a big part of it wasn't a full documentary like Rob was talking about, but it was a video reel of customer clips,
Yeah.
and that was what was impactful.
And I suppose, Jude and Hannah, because you actually brought research participants into the room with clients as part of your presentation for one of them as well, which is, I guess, kind of a similar idea of actually kind of bringing the client directly into hearing direct from the.
Yeah, I mean, we run the debrief, and then we sort of tack on a closer session onto it. So it's almost like hear it from us, now hear it brought to life. And that just really helps to actually for stakeholders to remember things in a different way. I think sometimes it's just like how interesting they're finding it that day and how much they're going to remember the moment. And it's something different for them. It's something they haven't done before in a debrief. They're obviously drowning in PowerPoint, as we all are. So it just like cuts through that. And that whole thing gets recorded. So I don't know about you, but we find in the world of Zoom, so many more people are asking for the recording of the debrief. So the debrief gets recorded, but it's got customers in. So that makes it more watchable for a lot of stakeholders as well. So yeah, that's just something that we're doing more and more, but only when we think it's really going to add value. Like, it's not something we'll do all the time, but actually it can be when we're not doing a close-knit, when stakeholders aren't spending as much time with customers in the body of the research, then we'll do it in the debrief especially.
Does anyone else have any questions? You can just turn your camera on if you have questions to ask. We've got a few kind of thank yous coming in. Great case studies. Thank you for sharing. Brilliant examples of research having a genuine impact. Inspiring to hear the great work across the ICG. Such thoughtful research and tension. Thank you for sharing your experience and expertise. Such a contrast to the crusade around automated AI analysis. So they were just some of the thoughts coming through. Anyone else want to ask a question?
I wouldn't mind asking a question. I'm intrigued,
Okay.
'cause just from a submission point of view, you know, we're qualies, aren't we? And you know, and ethnographers to some extent, or certainly
Yeah.
in terms of being very face-to-face human closeness, which I think is fascinating. Is that typical of the ICG? I mean, just as a, do we all tend to be sort of, because there were no sort of submissions that combined, you know, numbers, for example, and those. I was just intrigued. I'm relatively
In
new to
terms
the
of the
ICG as well.
award submissions,
Yes.
there is a variety. It does cover. I mean, the ICG has quant and qual and all kind of varieties and people providing services, and you do get that reflected in award submissions. I think this year particularly, yeah, they were generally qualitative, and there was that kind of demonstrated that kind of depth, but it's not necessarily the case. I certainly wouldn't want to put off a quant researcher from or a mixed method. And actually what we often have is people who are using a mixed methodology. So they maybe are having a qualitative phase and a quantitative phase, and that and so there's a kind of that. For some reason they didn't come through in the finalists this year, but certainly in the past we've had that. And so
Yeah.
and it's also one thing again, because a couple of people talked about working on tight budgets, and it's not always the case that people are working on tight budgets. Some independents are, you know, they're you know, some of the projects are big projects, so I wouldn't want to kind of pigeonhole into a type of thing. But yeah, this year there was very much a kind of qualitative and a very kind of human theme, which is as kind of Jeff's kind of comment is interesting in the sense of it was kind of against the kind of the narrative of things becoming more automated and artificial intelligence kind of taking over the world. And maybe that's because maybe that is the power of that we will have of being much more kind of being very human and bringing the humans into organizations. I'm just seeing if there are any more questions, because I think it's kind of time to.
I was just going to say a point to that. I think a key thing that I always look at when I see the, you know, why should you enter, is it's about impact. And I think naturally it's quite there's quite an easy progression from an impact with qual footage, because I think a lot of stakeholders are used to recognizing that we can use customers to help land insights in a business, because that's already well trodden ground. But I definitely think there's a lot more space we can explore and really push the envelope with quant, and using quant and video as well, and using the power of, film has obviously really propelled all of these projects to help the insights be activated in a business. And I think that personally, I don't think that is a qual thing. I think that is a research thing, and we can all be helping our clients land insights in a business, and video is just one thing we can do that with.
Great. Okay, well, it's 12 o'clock. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking us all out. It was really fascinating. Just seeing us anymore, just some more thank yous for sharing, very inspiring, showing the value of truly surfacing the emotion and human impact research can have. Thank you for sharing. Excellent case studies, lots of nice words coming through. So, but thank you very much. Oh,
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for organising, and Lucy.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 See you. Bye.
Bye.